Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to be talking about the Skellingrim campaign while a dog cries and jumps at the door behind me. She is terrible, she has an insatiable lust for attention, and we had a friend come over, so she's all excited, she received a whole bunch of attention, so now she needs all the attention. But anyway though, the Skellingrim campaign, where last we left off, the party had run into Josiah, and they were trying to figure out where to go from there. Main thing was that they decided that they were going to not help Josiah out at all. He told them to go get some supplies from deeper in the mines, and they figured, well, maybe we can find another exit. And there was actually a second exit, and I can't remember what the deal was. I believe that there was an elevator shaft or something. There was some way for them to get out, but it was blocked off. And along the way, there was a bunch of creatures formed from the sort of primordial stuff that the universe was made out of, and they had to fight through a whole bunch of them. And after a few fights, getting knocked around a little bit, not really being challenged too badly, like no one really, nobody went down during any of the fights or anything like that. But they decided not to test their luck, and they turned around, they went back, and they said, well, I guess that this is it. The universe just doesn't want us to proceed, and that's it. And I had actually intended for them to get out on the other side. That was originally what they were going to do with Deep Fjord in the first place. I think they would have just had to clear the rubble out of the way, and they would have been able to do it. But they didn't even attempt to clear the rubble out of the way. I think they briefly discussed it, and then said, no, that'll never work. Clearing the rubble will never work. It's probably caved in forever. And so they just went back to Josiah, and they tried to sort of negotiate with him and tell him promises. So we had one character that decided that he wanted to betray the party to Josiah. He was just like, I'm gonna help Josiah and be damn the rest of the party. And what I think he was trying to do is, this was just before he knew he was gonna have to retire from the game. So I think he was trying to get his character killed. It was one of those things like you can calmly retire your character. You don't generally need to have your character go out in a bang of betrayal or whatever. But he wanted to do that, so he was like, oh, I'll just betray the whole party to Josiah and everything like that. So he went in there and tried to talk to Josiah, and Josiah was like, well, convince your friends to let me go. And this was Shagberg, so Shagberg the orc, and so Shagberg was like, well, I'll try, but they don't listen to me. And it's like, well, this is the only way that this is going to work. You have to get them all of a single mind. And so he tried to do this for a while, and the party was just like, no, listen, we already discussed this. We're not going to help Josiah, the undead assassin. So, yeah, so what wound up happening instead was eventually they decided that maybe they could kill Josiah. And they weren't sure exactly how they were going to go about this, but they did have a cleric who could cast silence. And they noted the fact that Josiah was just pinned to a chair, which meant that if they cast a bubble of silence with that one spell, presuming that he was a wizard, he would be unable to do anything of value whatsoever, and he would go from whatever level he was to basically a completely harmless encounter. And again, this is just one of these things, D&D, you just get spells, they just do things, and, so you create this character, he's trapped in a chair, and the party was like, no, we just cast silence, and he's doomed. So they go down there, and there was actually no flaw with this plan. They were totally right. A character that can't move out of the silence buff, if he relies on silence attack, if he relies on magic, can't really do anything. There's not there's not a willpower resistance or anything like that. He can't reactivate his powers. It just lasts for a minute. You just cast the spell, lasts for a minute. And I think unless you have counterspell or whatever, once it's out, it's out. So so they cast the silence, and or I think as soon as they storm in, Josiah rolled higher on initiative. So they stormed in, and he activates a spell that he had prepared. And what it does is it creates this this whole range of darkness. And I can't remember what this was, but it was a reasonably high-level spell. It was something that you could prepare ahead of time, I believe. It was a ritual spell or something like that. But anyway, though, he just creates this this range of magical darkness, which nobody can see into, but he can see in. And everyone assumed that the reason he could see through it was because he was a skeleton, which was mistake number one, because the party was not actually sure if skeletons could see in magical darkness quite like that. But they can't. They couldn't. Not magical darkness. Josiah, however, could, because the party believed that he was a wizard. He was actually a warlock. So warlocks are funny in D&D because they're magical. They get some high-powered magical spells, but they function a little bit differently. They're actually more like red mages, if you want to think like that. They get access to good combat abilities. In fact, I think that their combat abilities, like their actual like martial combat abilities, are probably one of the only reasons you want to play as a warlock. It's like if you want to be a spell slinging sword fighter. They get like this Pact of the Blade thing, which gives them a magical weapon of their choice, and then they can take these rituals or whatever they're called, invocations, I think is what it is, where like whatever patron demon or eldritch thing gave them their powers, it grants them boons, various boons. And so like you say, like, oh, I have the Pact of the Blade, which means that I have a magical sword. And then, you say like, oh, and then the Pact of my Demon Lord, he gives me the ability to stab people harder and to use my charisma to stab people harder and to do this or do that. And there's a bunch of buffs to like combat that put them on par, or if not on par, at least close to a standard combat character. And actually I had a backup character, like I play with Dr. Putterdale in another campaign, but I made a backup character and they let me roll. And again, like I complained about this, where like, oh, it's all depending on dice rolls. I rolled up a second character and it was like everything was like well above average. And I played like one trial game with them where we were just like for fun. We were like, yeah, do you want to play Tripudio, the Warlock? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so for like one glorious round, Tripudio is just like death incarnate. Warlocks are like this because like he gets this thing, like when he gets attacked, he gets to counterattack with Hellish Rebuke, which like he just like spits flames at whoever hits him. He gets like multi-attack, he gets a ranged attack. So they get all kinds of combat spells. Like Warlocks are actually fairly powerful, extremely versatile. They're not quite as good as a fighter, like in straight hand-to-hand combat, but they can totally go toe-to-toe. They're not quite as good at magic as like a dedicated wizard, but again, they can totally go toe-to-toe. Their main thing is that they run out of spells before the wizard does. But, in my opinion, it doesn't matter, because once you run out of spells, you just stab the wizard to death. So, yeah, they're pretty good. So anyway, so Josiah was a warlock. He was this versatile sort of like, I can stab things, I can do this, and I can do that. With the comedic angle being that he was stuck to the chair. But he was like level 20, because he was like the pinnacle of murder as far as assassins go. He was like the guy that Archaeopteryx turned to whenever he wanted someone very important to be killed. Josiah would go and he would end that person. And in his final fight with the last black wizard ever in existence, one of the most powerful black wizards to have ever lived, Josiah had killed most of the others. The person had to essentially sacrifice himself. Like he set up a trap and got Josiah with his own arrogance. That's how he got stuck to the chair. It was like, kill me. You could kill me, but you'll never occupy the throne. Like, you'll never sit on this throne, Josiah. And then Josiah sat on the throne and he was trapped. But it was kind of like one of those things. It was like they were just like, we can't beat him, but I can definitely sacrifice myself and then trap him indefinitely. So he was like phenomenally good. Like level 20 in D&D is like half god. Like the gods are like level 40. But of course, because D&D raises things up exponentially, and kind of like you just gain powers in huge bursts, it's really not a very good, maybe you wouldn't say half god, maybe like, I don't know, 1/10 god or something like that. Whatever the case, you're sitting on a lot of power at level 20. And, it's pretty ludicrous. But when when your ass is stuck to a chair, and you can't get up, and then the party disables all your spells, like, you can be level 20 as level 20 as you want to be, but, you're still stuck to the chair. So the party comes in, and he puts up the magical darkness barrier, and then the party's like, oh, shoot, and then they leave. Like, they turn around and they leave, and they're like, all right, we weren't expecting that. Like, does anyone have the ability to, like, dispel that? And someone was like, well, I do, but, like, what level spell is that? Because if it's too high of a level, it's going to be hard to dispel. And they're like, well, we could try it, and we'll just see what happens. All right, we'll run back in, and we're pretty sure, like, we know where the throne is, so we just have to get to the throne and then stab him to death, right? Because he can't cast spells, and this is it. Like, he's a wizard, so he's useless now. So the party is like, they gather up their resolve, and they're like, he can't go anywhere, and we have a plan, we're going. And so they rush in, and they run up to Josiah, and one of the characters, Guff the Undying, he takes like a sack, like he has this clever plan. He takes a sack, and he runs up to Josiah, and like he rolls really well, and he just like puts the sack over Josiah's head. Because he's like, well, yeah, he can see us, but not if we put a sack over his head. He can't see through the sack. And so they run up and they just like put this sack over Josiah's head and then just start like rolling to attack. Like they're just like gonna wail on him while he's like got a sack over his head and he's magically like they're just essentially bullying Josiah. And everyone's like around the table and they're like laughing and they're like, oh my god, this poor wizard. Like he was one of the greats, but we're destroyed. Like we're just kicking his ass now. And so the party's like all like high-fiving and having a good time. And then Guff, who's holding the sack over his head, I'm like, Guff, you disappear into hell briefly. Like everyone's like I think there was Rummel was there, and Rummel had a familiar who could see in magical darkness because it was an imp, it was a devil, and they could do that. And so like he was communicating like her name was Peyton, and so Peyton the imp was communicating with Rummel, and like Rummel's like, what do you see in there? What do you see? I'll shout it into the silence bubble. He was on the outside of the silence bubble, so he could shout into the party to let them know if anything happened, but. Or I can't remember, maybe that didn't work. I think he was just like sideline. He might have just been on the sideline just in case. Because he was a pact to the chain, which meant that he had the familiar thing going on. So anyway though, so he was just watching, and so like Peyton is just watching, and then she goes, Guff is gone, yes. And Rummel's like, what do you mean Guff is gone? He's like, the skeleton hit him with his sword and he is gone now, yes. So Rummel was like, oh, and so like the rest, there was a couple of other guys, like 2 or 3 support characters that had stayed behind, and he just turns to them and he goes, yeah, like Guff just vanished. And they were like, what? And they were like, yeah, apparently the skeleton hit Guff with the sword and he just vanished. And so what it was is that there's a move that the warlocks get if you're Pact of the Fiend, which means essentially you made a deal with a demon, with the devil, and it allows you to, when you hit someone, you send them to hell. And they just take like ludicrous amounts of damage, and then like it's all psychic damage, and then when they come back, and presumably they'll be burnt to a crisp. So the damage with that was incredibly severe, and it nearly killed Guff outright. But he came back, and after that, like the party was like wailing on him, and they were like, man, like I'm really shocked at what a beating this wizard can take. Like this is kind of nuts, isn't it? Like I had Josiah statted out, but like I say, like level 20 is pretty ludicrous. So he was just taking all this damage, and on top of that, like the warlocks, they also get this ability where you like choose a type of weapon, and like that type of weapon does half damage to you. So I think I chose like blade or some really common kind of like thing, which a lot of the party had, because like there were piercing weapons, like there's piercing, there's blade, there's bludgeoning, and the party had a variety of weapons, but I think I just chose something really common like piercing or like bludgeoning, or I think it might have been bludgeoning because everyone went in there expecting that, you know, skeletons are weak to bludgeoning in D&D. So I kind of threw him a bait and switch on that, where it was like, oh no, he's resistant to bludgeoning. So it all threw them for a loop. Like they were expecting wizard, and they got warlock, and so like the best part was that they couldn't see Guff disappear, and because of the bubble of silence, they couldn't hear Guff disappear. And when he comes back and he's like there on the floor, they didn't like catch on for quite a while that they were actually in a worse situation than they realized. So a lot of them were still in melee range, and you can only do that hurl through hell thing once. So after that, Josiah got the bag off of his head, and he started fighting back. And as people started getting like viciously stabbed, that's when they started to realize that things were going badly, and they kind of panicked. And like some of the party managed to escape, but Guff was completely unconscious, and no one could figure out, like no one knew that he was down. And then Serena went down too, and same situation. Serena, the thing about Serena's character was that she was very strong, like, but she had low health. She had like a -1 to Constitution or something like that. So yeah, so she was just kind of like up a creek. As soon as Josiah hit her, it was kind of she kind of went down. And like, you know, a level 20 character is generally going to hit, you know, even though she had good armor and all that stuff, it doesn't matter. Level 20 is just level 20. Like I said, there's this huge scale difference in power. And they could have maybe killed Josiah had they kept going. Like they still kind of had an upper hand, but they were probably going to have some serious party losses as a result. So they decided they didn't want to like risk their lives any further. They were like, oh god, like instead of going for broke, they panicked and they fled. And I was tracking the damage, and that was the thing, is that another player was like tracking the damage, and he was like, well, I was following the damage, and I think Josiah should be dead. And they were mistaken. I brought up the resistance thing, and I was like, well, you were doing a little bit less damage than you thought you were, and, you know, he's not a wizard, he's a warlock, and, you know, this and that and this and that. And they were like, oh, okay. But that said, if you had kept at it, you probably would have killed him. I mean, like, you know, it would have been a harder fought battle, like, than what you were giving it credit for. You know, with fewer high fives at the end, you all would have, like, the darkness would have gone out, and you would have been like, oh, man, we had a lot of losses. But yeah, they panicked and they ran off. So this left Guff and Serena by themselves. And when they woke up, Serena had made a deal with Cerveri, the god of mercantile, that said whenever she died, instead of dying outright, she would expend a certain amount of her natural lifespan had she just died of old age. So, like, it was unclear exactly how much of the lifespan she was spending. That stipulation was in place, mainly so Serena wouldn't be doing completely reckless things. Like, you don't want to give a player the ability to never die, because then they'll do things like, oh, like, we have to get from here to there. Like, what if I just jump off this cliff or whatever, you know? Like, I'll jump off the cliff, I'll be fine because I can't die, and then I'll just get up and I'll run. Like, they have no fear of death, they'll start doing crazy things. So I was like, yeah, your life will gradually shorten. So if you do a lot of reckless stuff and get yourself killed, you know, multiple consecutive times over a short period, then I will just actually kill the character. But, you know, if you die on occasion, then that's fine. We'll just say that, you know, you shortened your fated lifespan somewhat. But, you know, whatever. Like, it was kind of that sort of, this gives me license. Like, play seriously, but I won't kill your character was kind of the deal that was struck. So, Serena died, and Guff also died, because they left him down there. And what was funny, like, on their way out, what you can do with Pact of the Blade is that you can summon the sword back into your hand at any time. So what Josiah was doing is, he was just, like, throwing it from the throne at people. And, like, you don't get combat bonuses to throw your weapons, so he was just using his natural, like, whatever his natural throwing ability was. He was just, like, chucking a sword at people, and then, like, summoning it back, and then chucking it again. And so, like, eventually, that was, I think that Lyman tried to stay behind and shoot him to death, because, you can get, like, there were some bonuses that he was relying on, and I think he was able to occasionally hit him, but he couldn't, like, tell if he was hitting, so he was just, like, firing crossbows at him. And so Josiah was, like, throwing the sword back to him. And I think there was, like, a couple of near misses that eventually just made Lyman give up on that plan as well. And it was kind of like there was no way to verify whether or not he was hitting Josiah in the first place. So, yeah, so it was a little bit silly. But in any case, though, so the party left. And Guff was killed and Serena was killed. But then Serena was fine, which was very perplexing to Josiah. He'd never killed someone who just, like, came back to life after being stabbed to death. But Guff died, and so what Josiah did then is, because, like, when you throw a very powerful character, like, a lot of GMs really like to do this, where they'll be like, this is my very, very powerful NPC, and he's so much more powerful than you, and this and that. But Josiah, like, I made him super powerful and super intimidating and really deadly, but he had all these, you know, these drawbacks and these features to him that would keep him from being frustrating. And if he did kill people, I didn't want it to turn around and be like, you know, oh, this is just the worst, like, this is so unfair. So what he did is, after he killed Guff, he revived Guff as a sentient undead. And so Guff comes back, and Josiah says, you know, all right, so you are undead at this point, like, you are dead, like, eventually the flesh is going to rot off of your bones and everyone's going to know it. So I have a proposal for you. Like, do you really want to continue helping the living? Because as soon as they realize you're undead, they're going to throw you in a fire. Or do you want to help me, and I'll help you get you back into your national territories where you belong? Because I only know of one place that'll accept you, and I happen to be very influential there. So this was his proposal. He goes, so get me off of this throne, and I'll take you to a society that'll accept you as you are now. Like, I understand if you resent me, like, you can always kill yourself again. My magic won't keep you bound indefinitely. But, you know, if you want to keep living as an undead, then you should probably let me go. You know, the only thing different between you and I now is just that you still have the skin on your bones. Like, we're the same now. So Guff thought about this, like, very briefly. But he came back to the party and he explained to them what had happened. Like, Serena was fine, so he was like, I'll let Serena go, but, you know. Like, Guff was like, I'll help you, but you have to let Serena go. And so, yeah, so... Right. So they let Serena go, and Guff comes back, and he goes, well, I'm dead now. And the party's like, you're what? And he's like, yeah, I'm dead. He resurrected me. I'm the living dead. And they were like, oh, man, like, we would be way more devastated by this if we didn't already know some cool undead people. Like, if we didn't already know you could still be cool while you're undead, whoa, boy, that would be terrible. So the party had to figure out what they wanted to do from this point forward, because Again, they probably could have killed Josiah. They technically hadn't lost any of their number. But when they realized that they were dealing with like a warlock rather than a wizard, that changed things. I believe, like if they kept at it, like I say, I think the hurl through hell thing you can only do once. So that was like Josiah's big, like, whoever's messing with me, you're going to hell kind of deal. But after that, like they don't really get very many spells, and with the silence bubble, he really lost a lot of versatility and function. So the magical darkness was the only big deal they still had to worry about, but they did have dispel ability. So if they'd thrown enough dispels at it, they probably could have gotten rid of it, and they probably could have actually killed Josiah, because then they could have seen him, and they could have stayed out of his throwing range, like, because the further people get away, the harder it is to hit them with a sword that you're just throwing. And they probably could have shot him with arrows until he was just like no more, until he just collapsed. But they were like, yeah, that was scary. Like, I don't want to mess with that again. And so they kind of gave up on it. They were like, all right, what are our other plans? What are our other plans? And yeah, so what they decided is they decided to use sending, and they said like, well, wait, we know someone who's also very magically powerful, and I think I got this backwards. I believe that they created this plan after. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they created this plan afterward. Okay, so this actually happened first. The first thing they did is they called for help. They used sending, and they were like, I think they reached out to Count Calaris, and they were like, hey, we're trapped in the mines, we need help. And then Count Calaris is like, okay, like I'll tell Dalton. Dalton's the fire wizard. He specializes in battle magic. So they get Count Calaris, so Dalton shows up. Like, they go to the front door and they wait for Dalton, and so Dalton opens the doors, and they're like, oh, thank God, Dalton, you're here, and you open the doors, this means we can escape. And Dalton is like, no, is Josiah down here? Turn around, we're going down, we're gonna kill him. And right, this is how the magical blackness got activated. Is Dalton decided, like, he'd rolled up his sleeves and he was like, I'm going to kill Josiah. If he's trapped down there, it's just a matter of killing him. That's all that we're going to do. So he marches straight down there and, rolls up his sleeves. He gets the first attack off, I think. Like, he walks in and he just throws a fireball at Josiah. Hits him dead on. Boom, fireball. And then the magical blackness went up. And I believe immediately after that, Finger of Death or something like that. And Dalton was, like, a reasonably powerful wizard. But the problem with them is that they have 0 health, wizards in 5th edition D&D. Like, in fact, wizards in 5th edition D&D, aside from their ridiculous versatility, really don't have very much going for them. So, it was just like Finger of Death or something like that, or it might have been Power Word Kill. I think it was Power Word Kill, which is one thing that really spooked the party, because they were like, oh, that's a very powerful. So Dalton's like, Fireball, and then Josiah responds, Power Word Kill, and Dalton just dies. And then the party panics and they run back and the door is closed. So right, that was when they came up with their second plan of attack. Or maybe it was, I have no idea. Whatever order it was in, they definitely called on Dalton, who then led them back down there, and then he got killed right off the bat. And the funny thing was that, then they were all panicked. They're like, oh no, we just killed one of our, like, top wizards. Like, one of the top leaders of the mortal, like, coalition is dead now. And so they were like, does anyone know Gentle Repose? Does anyone know Gentle? We have to go get his body. And so, like, they like recovered his body, and they were like trying to preserve his body, and they were like, how long can this, like, we have to keep him until we can get like a diamond, and then we can revive him back to no. And so they were all panicking, and what they didn't realize was that there's a spell in there called Clone, where, like, if you plan ahead and you, like, create a vessel, then if you die, your soul just goes to a clone of yourself and you're resurrected, without the aid of, like, a cleric or anything like that. You don't need the intervention of God. You're a wizard. You're a wizard. You can live forever like this. And in fact, a couple of the wizards were still around from the old days of the War of Undead Rights. And this was because of the cloning thing. And the guy who was actually mostly responsible for the clones was the White Wizard. He was the one who specialized in magic of the flesh, magic of the healing, and things like that. So he'd made clones for everybody, and so Dalton died and then just woke up as one of his clones and was like, well, I got killed by Josiah, and then, like, mad, like, he was angry. He's like, I'll get around to this later. But, like, the party didn't know that he had a clone, and so the party was, like, trying to save his body, and they're like, oh, he's dead forever now, he's dead forever. So yeah, just panic, absolute panic. in the end, I can't... Oh, yes, now I remember how exactly they got out of this. In the end, they were like, well, Dalton failed. Like, who else do we know? Like, do we know anyone else more powerful than Josiah who could get us out of this jam? Skellingrim. And so they called up Burgundy, and they were like, hey, Burgundy, you know Josiah, right? Like, we're sort of trapped with him in the Deep Fjord mines, and we sort of need help. Like, could you send someone to help us out? And Burgundy's like, look, guys, what are you doing in the mines? And they were like, we're working, and we just really need help. Please send someone. And Burgundy's like, okay, all right, but I'm gonna have to ask for a favor. Is that okay? And they were like, yeah, that'd be fine. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna send somebody. So he sends a guy, like one of his lieutenants comes out, like one of his undead lieutenants flies out on an undead wyvern. He lands and he like opens up the door and he's like, hey guys. And they're like, oh, thank God, like the undead are so cool. I'm so sorry we have to go to war. Like, if we could only see eye to eye and we didn't have these conflicts of interest. And he's like, yeah. So anyway, the boss told me to tell you, like, because you're hobnobbing with the wizards right now, could you go and talk to the brown wizard in the capital of the Elvish city? I can't remember what I called it now. And it's like, could you tell them that we're going to attack here? Like, just persuade them that that's where we're going to go, so that you can get them to mobilize their troops over here. And they're like, oh, why? And they're like, well, just, don't worry about it. Just tell them to mobilize their troops to this position. Just if you can get them to do that, you're square with us. And they were like, okay, all right, we'll do that. And he was like, all right, fair enough. I'll see you guys later. And so he gets back on his wyvern and he flies away. And they were like, all right. So Burgundy pretty much just put it on our honor to decide whether or not we're going to pay him back. And, Burgundy's a great guy, but we're kind of working exactly against him right now. and his trust is badly placed. So we have to hatch a plan, guys. We have to hatch a plan. We're going to go to the place that we were told to go, and we're going to inform them that we were told to tell them to move their troops to this location. So that'll be like, we did a square for Burgundy, but not really, while also helping the elves, but kind of not really. And that way we're still sort of neutral and everyone's happy. And I'm not exactly sure like why they came to this plan, like why they didn't just like commit to, all right, we're double agents now, but they kind of want to, I think it was because they were still like, Burgundy's cool. Like, we called Dalton, and Dalton nearly got us all killed, but when we called Burgundy, like, he just opened the door and was like, all right, come on, everybody, you're free to go. So, oh, that is a noisy car going by. Yeah. But anyway, though, this is a good place to stop for now. I'm actually going to do a second video this week. I missed a week, so we're going to do another one same week. But anyway, thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll catch you all next time.